Hey guys, welcome to the all new Built for Playmakers channel here on YouTube. Those of you that have been rocking with me, since the past 2 years when we started the podcast, been out of the game for a little while. Man, life's been crazy, but had a lot of people to reach out and say, "Hey, man, when are you going to do another podcast? When are you going to record?" And so just been thinking about the best way to go about doing things, and so thought that I'm going to continue to post audio links on the podcast feed. So if you subscribe there, you'll continue to get the content. But make sure you go to the YouTube channel and subscribe there. I'm going to be doing live streams, interviews, game predictions, breakdowns, all that good stuff. Just wanted to more of an interactive feel with the followers and fans of the Built for Playmaker content. So make sure you do that. And as always, we appreciate all the support that you guys have shown over the years. And man, it's going to be a great season coming up for FSU, and we're really excited. So I thought I would go ahead and just jump off the first inaugural video for YouTube with just a simple question. Can FSU compete for a college football playoff spot and/or national title? Expectations are crazy high. Some people, are kind of, thinking FSU is overrated. They didn't beat anybody ranked last year. That's what you hear from rival fans and some people that don't follow the program closely. And then you have some, FSU fans, hey, we're going to go undefeated and things like that. And, just looking at things as a whole, FSU brings back more production than anyone in the country. They have a Heisman contender there in Jordan Travis. They have a guy that's going to play in the NFL and Trey Benson in the backfield. Offensive line is going to be as deep as it's ever been in the last decade. And you're going to have probably three guys out there at receiver, counting tight end, and Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman, and Jaheim Bell. That they're probably going to play on Sundays. And when you look at the defense, you got a lot of guys coming back. Both starters at linebacker, two guys at safety. Ronaldo Green was a starter last year, cornerback, and then you got Fentrell Cypress there, Jarian Jones, Kevin Knowles making a move to safety, which actually is going to be pretty big, considering that a lot of people thought safety was a weakness here in the offseason, myself included. Then you look at the defensive line. You got Fabian Levitt coming back, Jared Verse. Both of those guys have potential to play on Sundays, but definitely Verse probably will be a first-round pick. Then you look at, guys they brought in from the portal, Gilbert Edmonds, Braden Fisk. Unfortunately, Daryl Jackson's not going to be available as of right now because of the NCAA not approving his waiver. But even still, you have way more depth going into 2023 than you did, going into 2022. And so when I look at everything as a whole, you look at the continuity. I mean, that's really big. You got the same staff, same coaches, most of the same players, most of the key guys that they brought in from the transfer portal were able to go through spring camp, which is huge. The only guy that's going to be a factor that wasn't able to do that was Keon Coleman at wide receiver. But, he's played a lot of football. And let me tell you, if you haven't watched this interview from last week, I posted about it on Twitter or Tweet X or whatever you want to call it nowadays. His level of detail going into what he looks at when he's analyzing film was, you can tell that guy is all about his business as far as learning everything he needs to learn so that, he'll be at FSU for the next, 6-7 months. And then, hey, he's going to be off to the NFL. He's really looking to make this year count. He knows he's going to be in an offense that is built for playmakers. Let me plug that in there real quick. But yeah, so they have all of the ingredients to have an elite offense, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. You have all the makings of having a really good defense, even better than last year. And a lot of people give last year's defense a lot of crap, but we're going to talk about that too. But Yeah, I think they can compete for a college football playoff, potentially national title, because really, when you look at it, it's really a 2 game season. You got LSU in the opener, and then you have Clemson in Game 4. And depending on how those 2 games go, if FSU wins both of those games, I mean, man, FSU Twitter is going to be unbearable. Oh my goodness! And not to mention all of the crap that the other ACC fans, especially the North Carolina-based schools. I live in North Carolina, so listen. Oh, I want to beat Wake Forest by a gazillion points. I promise you. Oh, God, I those fans are something else, man. Listen, but that's also another reason why FSU's got to get out of the ACC too. You're talking about conference realignment. I mean, nobody respects the ACC other than Clemson. It's like, hey, who did you beat, right? So I mean, even if FSU went out there and beat LSU and then beat Clemson and then somehow for whatever reason just lost to some other Pittsburgh or somebody in the ACC, man, that would be a bad look, for FSU, even though they had beaten, 2 of the better teams out there. But yeah, it's a 2 game season, really, or 3 game season, I guess, depending on what Clemson does. If Clemson makes it to the ACC championship game along with FSU, then obviously you would have to beat them twice to, well, not necessarily twice, but you basically, if you win both of those games, you're going to be probably ACC champions. And so you can kind of afford to lose the LSU game. Just don't get blown out, which I don't think they will. If they beat Clemson, then probably a good chance you're going to play them again in the championship game. If not, whoever else you play, you should beat them, because those are the only two schools that really can match FSU as far as talent goes. Miami, I said before on social media months ago, Miami and Florida don't scare me. Miami, they got some young talent, but they don't have the horses. I think Tyler Van Dyke could be better, but I don't think they have the horses to hang with FSU. Florida's going to have, not to mention Miami has new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. Mario Cristobal is a terrible in-game coach. He's going to meddle with the offensive coordinator. So I don't really expect too much from those guys. And then Florida, they have a new defensive coordinator, new quarterback. I expect them to be very conservative on offense. Probably, try to manage the clock, run the ball, not make mistakes, that sort of deal. Um, but I don't think they have the horses to hang with FSU this year either. They have a brutal schedule. And, they might quit by the time they play FSU last regular season game. So yeah, so and when you look at the Clemson game, it's Game 4. Clemson has a new offensive coordinator, new quarterback, but not necessarily new, but it's really inexperienced. And so it'll be good for FSU to get Clemson early on. It is on the road, but FSU went up to Clemson in 2021 with a much lesser team and had Clemson really beat. I mean, they really they could have won that game. Obviously, got away late, but they're going to go up there this year with a far superior team than what they had in 2021. I mean, if this year's team played 2021, they probably win going away, just because you have more talent and more depth overall. So that's a game that I'm looking forward to breaking down along with LSU. I'm going to go back and watch both of those games. But when you look at the LSU game last year, granted, LSU was it was their first game, new coach, new schemes. Their very first game, FSU did have a game under their belt, but that game shouldn't have been close. FSU should have scored 40 points in that game. I mean, really, they should have scored 40 points against Clemson. Um, yeah, and so that kind of leads me into, the next question there, is, uh, why it's on the offense for FSU to have success in 2023. I've seen a lot of people from Jeff Cameron, other people, talking about, it's going to be on the defense as far as how far FSU can go. I disagree wholeheartedly. And here's why. When you look at the defense last year, everybody's like, oh, any offense that had a pulse, they were able to do whatever they wanted to do, which what was not true. Also, you have to look at the context of Fabian Lovett missed most of the season. Jared Verse played most of the season at like 60, 70% because, he got hurt in the Louisville game. And when you really look at the defense over the last 2 years, they gave up 38 points against Notre Dame in the season opener um, in 2021. Uh, that was 38, including overtime. They gave up 38 last year against UF. They gave up 34 against Clemson last year. Other than that, teams are not going out there scoring a whole lot of points on FSU. They might score 31, they might score 27, 24. They allowed 20 points per game last year. It's an offensive game nowadays. And if we expect FSU's offense to be elite this year, there's no reason why they shouldn't score 40 plus points a game this year. I mean, simple as that. And the FSU defense will be good enough. If that's the case, FSU defense will be good enough to win every game. If the offense goes out there and scores the way we think they will, based on who all they have coming back and all the talent that's added, it shouldn't be a problem. Plus, when you go back and look at last year on defense, mind you, you're missing, Lovett and versus playing in a limited capacity. And this is something too. Let me just throw this out there. So the Wake Forest game, FSU goes out there, scores first drive, boom, 7-0. Defense gets a stop on Wake Forest's first possession. FSU has a chance to go up 14-0. They don't. They did this quite a few times last year against Clemson. FSU goes up there, scores first, boom. Defense gets a stop on Clemson's first offensive possession. A chance again to go up 14-0. They don't. Against NC State, got a huge lead at halftime. Don't score in the second half. Right? Also, when you're looking at what the defense is doing in points allowed, there's a game within the game that a lot of people don't pay attention to. So, for instance, against Clemson last year, Clemson scored 34 points total. Okay? Now, there was a possession where FSU, Jordan Travis fumbled the ball, and Clemson got the ball on the FSU 42-yard line. They give up a touchdown off of that possession. The beginning of the third quarter, Clemson runs the kickoff back 60-some yards. They begin that possession on the FSU 31-yard line. They allow a touchdown. Then there's another opportunity where FSU's offense goes forward on fourth down, deep in their own territory, turnover on downs, and Clemson gets the ball on the FSU 34-yard line. And the FSU defense holds them to a field goal. That's 17 points. 17 points where Clemson's offense got the ball in FSU territory when it wasn't anything to do with the defense. Now, granted, you want the defense to get a stop or to hold them to field goals, but man, whenever you're talking about, get the ball on your side of the field, it's hard. It's hard to get stops. And so half of their points came off of those three miscues, so to speak. So the defense, their Achilles heel last year mainly was stopping the run whenever Fabian Lovett got hurt, and then kind of winning those one-on-one battles on third down or in the red zone. Guys would be in position and just want to make plays or miss tackles, things like that. But I think they have the guys, this year, another year in the defense. You're going to miss Jamie Robinson, but overall, the defensive line has better depth. They should be able to collapse the pocket up the middle. Plus, bringing that pressure off the edge, so guys won't be able to step up in the pocket. So that's going to hopefully turn into more sacks, more QB hurries, more errant throws, which should turn into potential turnovers. And that's something that they didn't do well either last year, was force a lot of turnovers. I think they only had, I think it was 8 interceptions. They should have had more than that. They were in position to have more than that. They just didn't. They just didn't catch the ball. But that's something that Patrick Surtain is really emphasized, and something that is showing up, in practice and fall camp thus far. So, um, yeah, so the defense is going to be plenty good enough. I think to hold most offenses in check. I mean, really, aside from LSU, I mean, Clemson, we'll see. It just depends on, how quickly their quarterback can acclimate to the offense. I mean, they have a really good offensive coordinator, but it's game four. It's game four. They don't really have the receivers outside that they used to have. When they were on their run. And again, whenever you have Lovett in there, Fisk in there, Joshua Farmer in there, able to cog up the middle and slow that running game down that Clemson was able to establish last year with Will Shipley, maybe a little different. And I don't trust Clemson's defensive coordinators. Those guys, they're not vendables. And Clemson lost quite a bit from last year's team. So looking forward to breaking that game down. But all in all, again, it goes back to LSU and Clemson, and then from there, um, FSU should run the table. I mean, I did a post on chopchat.com. I'm the editor of that site, been running that site since 2016. Put out a lot of what I think, good content out there, original content. So I wrote about the three most overrated teams on the schedule for 2023 recently, which was harder to do this year. Past years been really easy because a lot of teams have gotten hyped that was undeserved. Miami almost every year. Last year was a joke. They were ranked, top 20, top 25, and pointed out, probably should slow your roll on that one, Miami, and media. And of course, we saw what happened with that. And but this year was difficult. Plus, you don't have the division, so you don't have some of the usual teams that you play. But looking at, a lot of people are high on Duke. And Duke does return a lot of production from last year, but at the same time, Duke played a terrible schedule. They beat two teams that had winning records last year, and they just don't have the depth or the talent overall. I think to compete for 4 quarters with FSU. When you look at Wake Forest, again, they're going to lose a lot of those super COVID seniors. Their defense wasn't good anyway to start with. So when you add that on top of losing, a lot of veteran guys that are like 24 years old, they're going to have a new quarterback. So losing Sam Hartman, and I think they unfortunately lost one of their top wide receivers also to injury. I think he'll be out 3 to 6 months, I saw, so probably won't be back by the time FSU plays them. Prayers out to him. Hopefully, he makes a speedy recovery. You don't ever want to see anybody get hurt, whether it's from a rival team or whomever. And then the other team was Pitt. A lot of people look at Pitt. They won 9 games last year, and they've had a solid program under Pat Narduzzi, but they lost a lot from their defense, especially their defensive line. And they're going to have a new quarterback, transfer from Boston College, Phil Jakovic, who, if you read anything from me on Chop Chat over the last couple of years, a lot of people were singing his praises, talking about how good he was, and he has NFL potential, and I just haven't seen it. Maybe it's because he was at Boston College and he didn't have a lot of talent around him, but they did have a receiver over the last couple of years that went fairly high in the NFL draft. But he doesn't scare me, and Narduzzi's offense is usually more run heavy. I don't think they have any receivers out wide that really scare you to death. I think the biggest thing for them is they lost a lot from the defense, and so it is on the road. But I look at it this way: if you're an elite team, um, I don't. If you're an elite team, I don't really think there's any such thing as a trap game, so to speak. Elite programs or elite teams, they just don't lose those type of games, right? So if FSU is as good as what we think, then that shouldn't be the case, especially if they start out the year beating both LSU and Clemson. So with that being said, yes, to answer the question, I definitely think that FSU can compete for a college football playoff and a national title. Once you get to the playoff, it just depends on the other three teams. I think FSU can play with anyone, barring everybody's healthy. Whether it's Georgia, whether it's Ohio State or Alabama or whomever like that. Starter for starter, I think they can play with them. They have, um, I think, the recipe to hang with those teams. But it comes down, and those games always comes down to just the margins. There's a very small margin of error in those type of games. You can't afford to turn the ball over 2 or 3 times. You can't afford to have go 3 of 15 on third downs. You can't have a whole bunch of penalties that keep you behind the chains. Field position is usually pretty big. Special teams comes into play. We saw that last year in the playoffs. So yeah, it's just the margins of error are smaller whenever you're talking about playing elite teams or programs that have as much talent as you or more talent than you or better depth. But if FSU goes out there and plays a really good game and they're efficient, whenever they get in the red zone, scoring touchdowns instead of settling for field goals or missing opportunities to score. And that's something that I wrote about too on Chop Chat before I get out of here. I want to point this out. If FSU has an elite offense, this won't happen in 2023. Last year, FSU got into the red zone 66 times. They scored 46 touchdowns and 10 field goals. So that meant they had 10 possessions where they either missed a field goal or had a turnover or a turnover on downs, right? And that was probably the difference in winning. So yeah, it is on the offense in 2023 to determine how successful FSU would be. And we'll look forward to live streaming again, like I said, and interacting with you guys in real time, pulling up your questions and answering them right here on the spot. Feel free to leave a comment here if you agree or disagree. And I'll definitely take that into consideration whenever I record the next episode. And we can, again, thank you guys for tuning in and appreciate the support. And go Noles.